Good evening. Thank you so much for joining the Minority Caucus's monthly meeting. Today is Monday, December the 14th. I know it's been a long day of meetings and pretty long budget meeting. And Vice Chair Porterfield, you did an outstanding job chairing that meeting. Can you all hear me? So thank you all very much for joining. Before we get started, I want to move a motion pursuant to Governor Lee's Executive Order number 65 regarding electronic meetings. I make a motion that this committee meeting agenda constitutes essential business of the Metropolitan Council, and that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Is there a
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Can I get, I'm going to have to take a voice vote from each person. So it would be Councilwoman Lee.
Aye.
Councilman Taylor.
Aye.
Councilwoman Porterfield. Councilwoman Porterfield. Councilmember Styles.
Aye.
Councilmember Toombs.
Aye.
Councilmember Suara.
Aye.
I don't know what's going on with Councilmember Porterfield. She's listed as being signed on, but she's not responding. But nonetheless, now that Councilmember Suara has joined us, we do have a quorum. I wanted first to indicate that our guest, Mr. Doug Crulin, who we had intended to serve as our guest tonight, is not going to be able to serve us because he doesn't have his report ready from the disparity study that was done. So we didn't want him to come, and he didn't want to come until he got it completed. So that has been postponed until further notice. And hopefully in the next couple of months, he will have it complete and we can have a robust conversation regarding it. But Doug Crulin is from the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority. He serves as the CEO. I also wanted to reach out to you all in regards to the Hospital Authority Board. You know, Michelle Robinson has been nominated. She's the COO from St. Thomas by the mayor's office. And I know it was deferred at the last council meeting, but I wanted to share with you all that little history. I know previously we've had Mary Buffwack, who was over neighborhood health. We've had Harry Jacobson, who was the CEO of Vanderbilt Medical School, or I think one of those positions, I think it was the medical school. And they've always been inherent on placing someone in a position who would take patients away from Metro General. I recall when I was working at Meharry that was one of the problems that Dr. Satcher had indicated that he thought that the hospital would have, is that those who paid insurance would be able and willing to go to other places and not just stay at Hubbard Hospital, which now is the Nashville General Hospital. And so that thing still remains that they would prefer to only have indigent patients go to Nashville General Hospital, which means that it would be very difficult for Nashville General to make any money. And it just is, to me, a direct conflict of interest. And I understand they want executive level individuals, but I don't think that they need to appoint people who are in direct conflict with Nashville General Hospital. And I think it basically undermines the hospital itself, and they can't generate the money that they need. So they need to consider some other people. It's just like me working at Streetworks, and I put someone from Nashville Cares on my board, or the Tennessee Titans bring in somebody from the Indianapolis Colts to be on their board while they are still associated with that organization. So I can tell you that I did submit a resume for Tamika Hudson, who is a very experienced, well-versed nurse. She has a master's degree and almost a doctorate degree from Vanderbilt University. And when I sent it to Mr. Jameson in the mayor's office, he wrote back and told me how impressive it was, but nonetheless, they moved forward with Ms. Robertson as their nominee. So I am asking the Minority Caucus to take a stand on this, and I would love to hear some comments in regards to my suggestion. Yes, those hands came up almost simultaneously. So I'll just start with Councilmember Toombs. I saw yours first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did reach out to the administration to express my opposition to the appointment, because I had folks reach out to me from Nashville General, including Dr. Webb, and stating their position on why they were opposed. And I do agree, because Nashville General, it does have the reputation as being the indigent hospital, and that gives a lot of people the impression that only people without insurance can go to Nashville General. But Nashville General is an excellent hospital that's for everyone. And they want insured people to come as well. I mean, that's how they fund their operations, with the folks with insurance that come to the hospital, in addition to the subsidy that they receive from the city and state and federal dollars. But I do think that it's a conflict. I work in healthcare. I advise regulatory boards, and we have hospital executives on those boards, and everybody says that they're looking out for what's best for the patient, but through their actions that they're also looking out for their institution. And so I just believe that this nominee, as great as she may be, as great as her resume may be, that her institution is going to be in the back of her mind, and Nashville General and moving Nashville General forward needs to be at the forefront of the mind of anybody that sits on that board in Nashville General, and its needs have to come first. So I don't think that it's a good appointment, no disrespect to the appointee, but I don't think that she's a good fit for that board. We really need someone who's going to put Nashville General first and listen to the executives at the hospital and help them with their plan to move forward with the hospital.
Thank you. I agree 100%. Councilmember Stiles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that it would behoove us, since that decision has been deferred, to come up with a candidate to supply to the administration and counter what they're offering with Ms. Robinson.
That's what I did when I submitted the resume of Ms. Hudson. And Mr. Jameson told me that when I submitted her CV, that the deadline had passed maybe 5 days earlier. And as opposed to, and I'm like, come on, Mike, really now? So, I mean, I think they do what it is that they want to do. So I submitted a CV of someone who's very well qualified for the role, and they moved forward with Ms. Robinson.
Do you think if we were all of us, not just individually submitting names, but collectively supporting a candidate and very vocal about it, that perhaps we would have a different outcome? Not that your person was not fantastic, but maybe a collective voice could be helpful.
And that is why I'm asking the Minority Caucus to do that and take a stance. And we don't have to take a stance on Ms. Hudson, although I would love to be able to do that, being that they have her credentials before them, but most definitely I would love for the Minority Caucus to take a stance in opposition of the nominee that was submitted by the mayor's office. And which means that they would have to go back and other names can be submitted.
Thank you. I think we can do both. I think we could support that and also put someone forth at the same time. I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lee.
I guess I just wanted, since everybody else has kind of talked, to say that I agree with what was being said. I was actually contacted as well, and the people weren't even with General Hospital. They were like outside people looking at this to say that didn't make any sense, that you have somebody on the board from a competing hospital, from a competing company, that didn't kind of make sense. So I wanted to put that in there. And again, I do not know this lady, so I'm not speaking towards her credentials or anything. I'm just speaking towards the way it is. You've got somebody on one board, going to one board that works for a competing organization that doesn't seem ethical. But I guess the question then would be, since you submitted Ms. Hudson, and they said that her credentials were outstanding, but it was kind of late. Has anything ever been done in the past where something has happened and they weren't done on time, but they were able to still count that person in?
I can't say right off that yes, it was, but I am pretty sure that it has. But even if not, without the evidence, if we do not agree and we oppose this particular nominee and the nominee does not move forward, then I do think that
They have to go back.
It's deferred, it would have to go back. Or if she's voted down, it would have to go back.
So I think what I heard was that you were looking for two separate things. One, you were looking for us as a group to go in and to not support this person. And then two, as a group for us to put forth a name that everybody supports. If I was hearing that right, then I would make a motion on the first one that we as an entity do not support this person that's been deferred, that's been up. If that makes sense, if I did that correctly, Madam Chair.
It does, you did, you made a good motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that the Minority Caucus take a stance in opposition of the nominee, Michelle Robinson, as the next appointee of the Hospital Authority Board that was submitted by the mayor's office. We need to take an individual vote. So I will vote.
Before we take a vote, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I raised my hand. I think my screen may not be showing. So you still entertaining discussion before you take the vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I do want to say that I read Ms. Robinson's resume, and it's very impressive. And I do know people that work at St. Thomas, and I believe that she will make good decisions for patients. But the hospital board is responsible for making decisions as it relates to Metro. And so that is the ground for us rejecting the nomination. So I do want us to make sure in our motion to be clear that we are rejecting the nomination because there is a conflict in terms of her coming from a competing or a competition to General Hospital. And if the role of the health board is to supervise general, we see that as a conflict. And so I want the motion to be specific in that regards, that is the reason why we are. So if we can amend that motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
as that was my motion, I think I stated when I was saying it, why it was that we were not doing it. And it was not because of anything, her credentials or anything, it was because she was working for a competing hospital. So I thought I made that very clear in my, it has nothing to do with her credentials in my motion.
right. I think it's more important that when we submit a letter to the mayor's office to make it clear in that letter, then basically the action that's being taken is opposing her nomination. So I appreciate the discussion in regards to it. And I do know that what you started out saying in your motion clearly stated that it was a conflict, as most of the discussion surrounding this has been regarding the conflict. So I appreciate each of you expressing your sentiments. So it's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion? So if not, then we will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Porterfield?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Stiles?
Aye.
Councilmember Toombs?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Vercher?
Aye.
Councilmember Suara?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you all very, very much. I will get with Rosie and we can come up with the letter and to submit to the mayor expressing the opposition of our new of the nominee that they submitted. So thank you all very, very much. The other thing that when we're talking about replacement, as we know earlier this week, Dr. Michael Caldwell resigned from Metro Health. And I know that Dr. Eddie Hamilton had been actually recruited to submit application for that position in this last time of them submitting. But after he had submitted and completed all of the paperwork, and even to some hesitation, he made it known to those who had recruited him that, you know, he did not have an unblemished past, and he was very transparent and clear with it, but they wanted to move forward with him. I know in my experience that that's been typical, that they have in mind those individuals that they want to put in positions, but they like to have a very well stacked African American that they want to put forth with heavy credentials to show and to make sure that the appearance of heavy competing is done. And with that in mind, and knowing that that's how things happen sometimes, I just thought it would be good to recommend Dr. Hamilton, being that he was a close finalist or maybe the only finalist in this last search. And I have asked him to attend the meeting today and give the caucus an opportunity to speak with him, so they would, so you all would actually have, you can make an educated decision on whether you would like to endorse the support of him as our new director of health. So Dr. Hamilton, thank you so much for taking time to be with us this evening. And with that, I open it up the floor for members to ask any questions after you give us a brief introduction of yourself.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurt, and thank all of you for inviting me to attend again. I certainly appreciate the trust and the confidence that Sharon has placed in me, and certainly if I'm called to serve, then that's, I have to respond in the affirmative, because there's just a legacy here that we are all kind of building on in our community. And so right now there is a crisis of leadership at the health department. I knew the previous director, Dr. Whitney Long, quite well when she worked for the Bureau of TennCare in my role as president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the relationship that we shared with TennCare at the time. And was disappointed to hear that she left, but was not surprised that she left, because it wasn't the kind of role that I think that she was most suited for. And then when they recruited Michael Caldwell, as Councilmember Hurt alluded to, Jim Cooper called me and asked me to apply. I have a long-standing relationship with the congressman, and he felt like, in his words, that I was the most qualified person to take on that job, and that I understood our community in a way that previous directors did not. And I reluctantly went through the process at his request, and I spoke with Dr. Jahanger, who's the board chair, prior to the application as well. And, again, I was willing to serve if asked, but I was not seeking that job, nor am I seeking that job right now. But I do know there is a crisis in our community, and it's only magnified by the pandemic. But the problem was there long before Dr. Caldwell arrived. So, again, I've served in a number of ways over my 30 plus years in this community. So we'll do what I'm asked to do. Certainly any way that I can be of assistance, I would be happy to do so. And I think they need long-term to find the right director. But right now, the culture there, from what I understand, what I perceive, the culture there is really not healthy right now. I think it's going to be hard for them to attract top talent right now until they have the situation there stabilized and working much better than it is currently. So with that, I'll stop. Most of you know me and know my background, and if anyone doesn't, has questions, I'm very comfortable answering those questions and just kind of sharing with you any information that you need from me at this time.
So are the hands that I see up, are they from the last time, or are they for this time to ask questions? Okay. Thank you. But I do have a question. Well, go ahead, Councilmember Suara. Councilmember Suara, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions, but I'll ask one because I want to wait until after you've asked yours as well. But the question that the most pressing that I wanted to ask Dr. Hamilton, you and I spoke this week, or was it last week, late last week, about a project that you're working on that is for the African American community. I guess my concern is, How does this play into this role? Would that be something that you would no longer be doing if you do get this position, or if you can speak to that? The second question will be, why are you interested in this role if we do recommend you?
Okay. On the first question, you're talking about the organization that we are trying to establish called ClearPath to do equitable development for Nashville. So the director of health position is certainly a full-time job, and it would be impossible to devote myself to other endeavors if I were asked to serve in that capacity, even in an interim role. It's going to take all of one's resources to do that job well. ClearPath is important to me. It's something that was initiated in February at the request of the mayor's office, but to this day they still have not made any kind of determination to fund it and to support it to the level that it would require for it to be successful. I don't separate the jobs though, because as you all know, when you talk about public health, you're primarily talking about, for our community, the social determinants of health that we reference all the time. And a lot of those determinants are directly related to equity and the lack of equity, the wealth and income inequality that persists in our community. So solving the challenges of public health and public safety are directly linked to solving the problems of economic disparity. And so, ClearPath is something that needs to happen, but that would have to be suspended as of right now in order to address the issues of the public health department right now. Second, in terms of why I'm seeking this job, I want to say again, I'm not seeking the job. Councilman Member Hurt approached me, knowing the history of me being asked prior to the current person taking that position. And at that time, I'm willing to serve. I've been asked over my career a number of times. I've been asked to do things of this nature. And again, I tend to, if I feel like I can do a good job at it, then I don't say no, but I would go into it enthusiastically, and there would be a learning curve. Again, I'm not seeking the job. I just know that right now, the pandemic locally, we've done better than some other cities, but we've not done as well as we could have. And I know the outgoing director has not involved himself into the level that he should have. It's fell to the board chair, and I've noticed that from a distance. What's missing there, again, is not just related to the pandemic. That's indicative that the entire organization has not been led well over the last 8 or 9 months that he's been there. It needs leadership. So I have that background. If I can be of assistance to the city, like I've always done for children, I will serve. If I'm the best person to take on that role right now, and you all ask me to do it, again, I could say I would not say no, but I'm at a good place in my life. I'm doing fine in spite of what happened to me 7 or 8 years ago. God has blessed me, but again, I think it's a duty, not an ambition is how I'm looking at this.
Thank you. You alluded to what happened 7 or 8 years ago. In looking at your background and some of the organization that you've chaired, you talk about the pediatrics organization, and you have a very great record of leading organization or starting companies. Your practice became the largest in the state. So your leadership skill and your organization skill, no one can question that. And I think that you will be great at this job. Now, the question that I must ask you is this. When I do Google your name, the first thing that came up is what happened that 6 years ago. And I think that playing the devil's advocate, that will be something that will come up in anybody's mind as to why we are putting forward your name, right? And so what would you say to that, just for somebody who is supportive but has that concern? Do you think any question around that might affect your nomination, or you don't think there's no relevance? And I'm just asking honestly as I can. Thank you.
Welcome the question. When Congressman Cooper approached me, that was my immediate response too. I made it real clear to him there's no way they're going to give me that job after having criminalized me in the manner in which they did in 2013. He's intimately aware of what happened to me during that time. He's one of the people that I relied on during that period of my life for counsel and support. He refers to my case to his law school classroom as a, quote, classic case of overzealous prosecution. I am the only person in the history of the world to have a misdemeanor conviction for healthcare fraud. And there's a reason for that. And, again, I don't really think we would need to spend this conversation talking about that in detail. But clearly, if someone reads that story and draws their own conclusion, I'm very comfortable with where I land and where they might land if they are objective in looking at how that was handled. I own the largest practice in the state of Tennessee. I was the sole owner of it. And like Sam Howard and Tony Sebrum and Sean Joseph and a trail of other black men in this city, when you reach a certain level of prominence, you become a target. And while I accepted a plea conviction, a misdemeanor plea conviction, anyone that's familiar with our criminal and justice system knows what a plea means and what it does not mean in our society. So if I felt for 1 second that I had done anything that was dishonorable to my family or to my community, I would not have the audacity to stand before you now. And part of what I think has bothered white people so much is the fact that I didn't go away when this happened. I continue to be who I am and to serve my community, and that will never change.
Dr. Hamilton, thank you. And I don't mean to have you rehash what happened. Please note that that's not the intent, but I always believe that when that question comes from us in this space, it's a lot better than when it comes out somewhere else. And I think that for people that didn't know the whole history, your answers matters. And so
Yes.
not to bring back bad memories, that is not the intent, but we also don't want to be a group that people perceive as being afraid to have the tough conversations, even with our own people. And so out of respect, I appreciate you're taking the time to answer it, and thanks for all that you've done and continue to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. I actually was going to make a comment that that your situation or even the medical director's position was parallel to Sean Joseph over at MNPS, because it is a position that serves the public. It is a position that serves disproportionately people of color, disproportionately people in poverty. And with that, it adds more and more stress. And we've seen time and time again how non-people of color are put in those positions and they are not successful. But you were very candid when you spoke of Sam Howard and Tony Sebrum, and I can attest to what they thought was going to be the fall of those individuals, including you. And Tony Sebrum, who probably was the trailblazer when it came to health care for a large number of massive people, actually moved to Africa, and he's not been back, to my understanding, because not only did he have an amazing program that TennCare basically is a duplication of, he hired many, many people. A lot of groups of people don't know that Lima Led and Tony Holt, they had innovative recovery, and their biggest contract was with Access Med that Tony Sebrum ran, the Tennessee Tribune. There was just many, many people who benefited from the work that Mr. Sebrum done. And he, and things just did not happen in a very good way. So I applaud you for continuing to walk with your head held high and your willingness to serve the community. In spite of the things that were intentionally designed and done for your fall.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Hamilton? Well, thank you very much for your time. I certainly appreciate it.
And thank you all for your service and your leadership. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the other thing I wanted to ask before we move into our elections is, did you all want to take a position as a caucus on the transportation plan?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
before we go to the transportation plan, are we doing anything on Dr. Hamilton? Are we submitting his name, or we're not taking a stand officially on that, or what is I just wanted to know, are we doing something with it, which is the point of having him to come and answer the questions? And
yes, I would like to. I would like to take a stance. I would like to have the caucus make a statement. I know that the caucus did not take a statement on Dr. Caldwell, as we saw things unfolding very quickly in that regard. And just as quickly as things unfolded, I think it's very critical for us to step up and make sure that we present someone in the position who would be able to fulfill the responsibilities in the way that it's necessary. Someone who's not in it for the money or the fame, but someone who really has the compassion, the care, the knowledge for people and for the city to move things forward. You know, I think, I know that Stephanie Bailey was the health director for several years, and they've relied on her to come back and help when they've had some, difficult challenges to work through. And I just think that it's more fitting for a person of color to handle those things. So it is my preference, but that we would submit Dr. Hamilton's name as a person that we would like to see appointed to the position. But I would need someone from the body to, and have the body to vote in the affirmative before we can move forward.
Okay, so moved. So I move that the Minority Caucus submit a statement recommending Dr. Hamilton for the position of the medical director.
Second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded that Dr. Hamilton's name be submitted for the position of medical director, health director for the city of Nashville. Any more discussion? Well, we will move forward with the vote, and I will start with, yes, Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you so much for recognizing me, Madam Chair. I do have just a little clarifying question. I know from my understanding of the conversation, Congressman Cooper recommended him last time, but Mayor Cooper went with Director Caldwell instead. Is there any, do we have any reason to believe that Mayor Cooper is not going to look at another candidate again? Like, is there any reason to believe that something has changed, that Mayor Cooper will now support Dr. Hamilton?
I'm not sure if he would or would not. What I believe, however, is that it makes a statement for the Minority Caucus to present the name of someone. And considering the fact, if we were able, which I believe we would be able to get a letter from Congressman Cooper in support of our nomination, I think that it will add pressure and it speaks to the influence that the Minority Caucus would have in such an appointment, knowing that this is an appointment that will disproportionately affect people of color. So while it is my hope that he would accept it and actually appoint Dr. Hamilton, I do think that it is just as important, if not more important, that the caucus make a stand at this particular time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll speak my piece, and then I will defer to anyone else that wants to speak. My only concern, I mean, just hearing about what he's done sounds absolutely phenomenal, and it sounds like he's amazing when it comes to healthcare. All things considered, I think that he could be an amazing candidate. My only concern would be, I hate the thought of putting someone up knowing that there is the possibility that the media is going to crucify him, knowing that there's a possibility that our colleagues will do the same. I think back to the COB nominations when we voted for Ashley, Timothy, and Sean, and one of the ladies who, Kelly, who was also nominated, she was one of the individuals, and how uncomfortable it was when one of our colleagues, was publicly bringing up social media posts and just publicly bringing up information. It was just uncomfortable to watch. And it seems like Dr. Hamilton is an amazing doctor. And I understand that he knows that this is a possibility, but it just makes me really uncomfortable knowing that we're bringing forth a candidate going into this, knowing that it will be this type of battle. So I just wanted to state I have concerns.
And I appreciate that. I understand that, but I can tell you that there are going to be concerns. Dr. Sean Joseph had no concerns. The board voted unanimously. They were excited for him to come, and they celebrated having him. And once he got here, everything changed. So I don't know if there is a safe place, as he said, for a Black man. There's been scrutiny about DeCosta Jenkins, who is the CEO of NES, scrutiny on Joseph Webb, the entire line of people that this has happened to. So I understand, but I think for those reasons is why we have to continue to make a stand. We have to continue to put it before them. We don't just give in, we make them tell us no. If that's what it's gonna be, we make them tell us no. We don't just let them, we don't buy down ourselves. Let them do it, is my position. So thank you. I'm from the 60s, so I get, really animated when it comes to that. So thank you very much for your comments. Councilman Taylor, I saw that your hand was up.
Thank you, Chair. I had a very lengthy conversation with Dr. Hamilton in regards to 37208, and which is kind of near and dear to me every day, because I sleep there every night. And there was a very strong focus on the work that he's trying to do with ClearPath. And from my understanding, that is his commitment right now. And so trying to understand, and I think he did make a point that it was a request for him to come. So we didn't get a chance to get a lot of conversation with him, and we emailed today again with that commitment to 37208. This doesn't necessarily fit into that commitment. So to be quite honest, I'm a bit confused of where the commitment lies. And I may be taking this a bit personal because of my position as the North Nashville councilman, but I'm trying to understand what the commitment is. With 37208, and I understand health disparities fall 100% in 37208. But does that remove the commitment and focus that we have on ClearPath in 37208? Is this a decision that we need to make today? I know that we're going to be moving a lot quicker with hiring a new director, but I just want to make sure that we have the correct focus as we move forward. Thank you, Chair.
You're quite welcome. I think as far as ClearPath is concerned, I don't think that it's going to happen, honestly. As he said, he's dependent on the mayor's office to provide, I guess, the foundational funding needed in order for him to be able to move forward with ClearPath. And that I don't think is going to happen, not in this time. With the financial challenges that we have, we've got to get the city in some good shape. So I'm not sure that that's going to happen with him depending on the mayor's office to do so. So I would say that would be my response in terms to ClearPath. Sammy Ariola, who was the interim director of health, on 2 or 3 different occasions when they chose someone else and they left and they put Sammy in the position, you would not find anyone better suited, more compassionate, and more willing to work and do a great job than what you found in Sammy. But because Sammy did not have an MD, was the reason why they kept saying that he could not take on the position permanently. We have looked to try to change the charter in order to make that change because that is antiquated in terms of that. But Sammy was so hurt and disappointed this last time because, after Dr. Paul left and they brought on Wendy Long, Dr. Long stayed about 9 months. And when she left, Sammy had to go into the position again. And then they brought in Dr. Caldwell. Did not make the change in the charter in order to accommodate the fact that Dr. Ariola had a PhD and not an MD. And he moved out of town. So it's a systemic thing that we are dealing with. And I would encourage you and us not to focus on the personal and the personalities of people, but understand what it is that we've been fighting for decades in this city for the rights of Black men. And because they have not been treated fairly, nowhere near equitable, but fairly. And you're not going to have many of them wanting the job because they can make more money elsewhere doing other things. So no, he's not running and knocking the door down and saying he wants this job because he's making the money. He doesn't need the job for that purpose, and he's serving the community. But he knows that there is a need for leadership in order to serve this Nashville community, and he's willing to step up and do it for the city of Nashville and for the people in 37208 and 218 and 205 and 215 and all of the 207s and all over 221. He's willing to step up for the entire city of Nashville. Councilmember Stiles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say I think that Dr. Hamilton has a phenomenal background and resume, but I do have reservations about putting someone forth, even if it was 8 years ago, to put them in the position of being drugged again through the press, but also putting forth a candidate knowing that that is something that will come up. It's not a possibility. That's guaranteed. So in the midst of thinking about people, I think we should take some time, and as the holiday is coming up, figure out who else would be a good fit for this position.
I think that's perfectly fine. The thing of it is that you also got to make sure that they want the position, because it's not a enamored position. It's not a highly sought after position. So it's going to be a difficult and daunting task, because it was difficult to replace Dr. Paul and then Dr. Long. So we're going to be right there again. So I respect everything that you all are saying, but I think that that you're missing a point in terms of it being a person as much as it being us moving quickly to make sure that the mayor sees, understands, and respects this body for everything that we have done individually and collectively. So thank you. It has been properly moved and seconded. We can go through a vote, and whatever happens, happens. So, Councilmember Porterfield.
Madam Chair, I'm going to be a no vote.
Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm trying to get some dinner, but I am a no vote.
Councilmember Vercher. Councilmember Vercher. Councilmember Gamble.
Madam Chair, I'm just joining. I apologize, I'm late, but I missed most of the discussion on this, so I'm not voting. I'm going to abstain on this.
Councilmember Stiles.
I am a no, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Toombs.
Abstain.
Councilmember Suara.
Abstain.
So we have 3 abstentions and I think 3 noes. So what we do know is that the motion fails, because the motion was to nominate Dr. Hamilton, or the caucus nominates Dr. Hamilton. So the motion fails. Thank you all very much, and please don't feel bad. I don't take it personal. I don't. It's not like you know. It's not me. I understand. Thank you. So now we are up for our elections. The positions that we have available are parliamentarian, secretary, treasurer, and vice chair. Councilman Porterfield and Councilman Stiles, your hands are still up. Do you have something you'd like to say?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for recognizing me. I don't know if now is the appropriate time to make the comment, but one thing I just wanted to add, Madam Chair, and it's something that I've mentioned before. I really would love for us to work on getting a list. I believe we can get this from the clerk's office of the positions for the boards and commissions that as they are coming open, so that we can know when vacancies will be on the board, so that we can start having an idea of who we may want to recommend for these positions, which I understand, you can argue some of us knew months ago that it wasn't going to work out with Dr. Caldwell, but in many cases, typically this would have been very unexpected. So we couldn't necessarily prepare to have candidates in the pipeline. But, going forward, if we could start working on individuals that we would like to consider, so that as the positions come open, we can be prepared as a caucus to bring forth people, and possibly if there's a way to, have some conversations to work on grooming some of those individuals, so that, we're not kind of waiting until it's time for a nomination. And again, I know that this situation is a different situation, but I'm speaking more so in general.
Thank you, Councilman Porterfield. I do appreciate that recommendation, but I don't know if you can see this or not, but I've got about 60 pages of front and back of our commissions, the boards and the commissions and the terms and the members and when they are, their terms expire. And I've had it for about a month, and I've only gotten through half of them, looking through it, trying to make sure that I identify the certain zip codes that they come through. So it could be another task to find this out and to monitor every commission in order for us to know it and to see it and be able to address it in that way. So I understand. I just don't know how we can do this, how we can really overcome this problem, because it's something that has existed year after year after year after year. It's a systemic problem.
I actually have a suggestion for that, Madam Chair. I spoke with one of our former council members, and I just, was expressing that this is something that I would like to see us do. And I was actually informed that this was something that I believe it was some of the members of the Minority Caucus was working on years ago with members of the Urban League and young professionals. And I think that would be a really great partnership with the Minority Caucus, the NAACP, the Urban League, Stand Up Nashville, any of our community organizations that are grooming community leaders, so that when these positions come open, we'll have a pipeline of people that are in the position to serve. And as we know, it tends to kind of be the same people every time around. And I think that we have seen some wonderful and qualified people come before us. But I think sometimes it may be appropriate to appoint someone with political savviness and knowledge and experience and background. And other times it may be appropriate for us to build new leadership and be able to appoint someone or recommend someone to start building up their leadership capabilities. So I think that it will be a wonderful thing for us to undertake. And I don't want to belabor the point, but I think it would be wonderful for us to do a partnership. So, this is something that we can look at, not tonight, Madam Chair, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there so that we can all, simmer with it and think through it and maybe address it again at a later meeting.
I think that's a great idea. I truly believe in succession planning and having people step up to the plate, willing to help navigate something like that would be awesome. I think that is sorely missed in our community, and I would love to see something like that happen. So that sounds like a great project for you to head up for the Minority Caucus. That's great. I love that idea. That's a great idea. Thank you very much. So, as we move on with the elections, as I said, we have parliamentarian, secretary, treasurer, and vice chair positions that we need to elect. And we've gotten some nominations, and we are willing to accept any that come to the floor. So we're going to start with parliamentarian first. And we received the nomination from Councilmember Gamble at our last meeting for Councilmember Taylor to serve in that role. Councilmember Taylor, are you interested in, do you accept the nomination?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I accept the nomination.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for parliamentarian? No other nominations. May I have a motion to close the nomination on parliamentarian?
So moved. Motion to close. Jennifer Gamble speaking.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. It's properly moved and seconded that the nominations close on the nomination of Councilmember Brandon Taylor. We have to take a roll call vote. Councilmember Porterfield?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
I think you must have been between bites. Councilmember Burcher?
Salmon croquettes, yes.
Councilmember Gamble?
Aye.
Councilmember Stiles?
Aye.
Councilmember Toombs?
Aye.
Councilmember Sepulveda?
Aye.
And Councilmember Suara?
Abstain. I'm kidding. Hi.
Okay, and Councilmember
I'm
Hurd?
shaking my fist at Councilmember Suara.
Councilmember Hurd is also an aye. So now that he was the lone nominee and everyone voted to close that motion, I don't think we need to vote for his appointment. So we can move on to secretary. We had a nomination for Councilmember Lee to serve as secretary, and Councilmember Lee declined that nomination. Yes, are there any other nominations for secretary? Is there any other nomination for secretary?
Who else we got? I would like to nominate, I was going to have Councilmember Lee, but it should, Gamble, Jennifer Gamble.
Thank you. Councilmember Jennifer Gamble, you have been nominated for secretary. Are you accepting that nomination?
I am not accepting that nomination. I have too much on my plate right now to accept that position, but I appreciate the consideration and the nomination.
I totally understand. Anyone else?
Sandra, I will go.
Madam Chair.
Yes, I see your hand, Councilmember Toombs.
Lord, okay. If no one else wants to do it, I will do it, Madam Chair.
You will Well, can we get, so are you nominating yourself?
I would like to nominate Councilmember Quante Toombs.
Second, aye.
Lord.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been probably moved and seconded that Councilmember Toombs serve as secretary. She's the nomination. Are there any other nominations? Since there are no other nominations, she's the sole nomination. We can take a vote. No discussion on that, is there? Or it was all of the laughter and the joy that I heard in the air? Are there any other discussions? Then we'll take a vote to close the nomination on Councilmember, well, no, the nomination was to nominate her. All in favor? We're going to take the vote. Councilmember Porterfield?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Vercher? Councilmember Gamble?
Aye.
Councilmember Stiles?
Praise God, aye.
Councilmember Toombs?
Aye.
Councilmember Sepulveda?
Aye.
Councilmember Suara?
Aye.
And Councilmember Hurt is an aye. The motion passes unanimously. And considering that she was the sole individual and the motion's closed on her nomination, I think we have moved for our new secretary, Councilmember Quante Toombs. Thank you. We have the position of treasurer, and I did not have any nominations for treasurer.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I should be raising my hand. I'm sorry that I am not.
That's okay. That's okay. Feel free. I mean, I appreciate the protocol and all of that, but I think this is a lightweight discussion where we are able to just speak.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to nominate Councilmember Stiles.
Councilmember Stiles, do you accept the nomination?
I do, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well, it's been moved. Is there a second on the nomination for Councilmember Stiles to serve as our treasurer?
Jennifer Gamble, I second that motion.
Thank you very much. It's been properly moved and seconded, and a councilmember has also agreed to serve. Any other nominations for a treasurer? There being none, then I ask that we close the nominations on the one nomination that we have, Councilmember Joyce Stiles to serve as treasurer, and we will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Porterfield?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Vercher? Councilmember Gamble?
Aye.
Councilmember Stiles?
That would be an aye.
Councilmember Toombs?
Aye.
Councilmember Sepulveda?
Aye.
Councilmember Suara?
Aye.
And Councilmember Hurt is an aye, so that makes it unanimous. Thank you all very, very much. The next position that we have is vice chair. And we had two nominations to come forward. One was for Councilmember Antoinette Lee, and one was for Councilmember Delicia Porterfield. Do the two of you accept the nominations that's been put forth for you? Councilmember Lee?
I do.
Thank you. Councilmember Porterfield?
I do.
Thank you very much. So we have properly moved on two nominees. May I get a second on the motions that have been submitted?
This is Councilmember Stiles. I second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded. I know since this is the only contested position, I think it would be fair to offer the two candidates a minute or two to make a statement or two in regards to their candidacy. Councilmember Lee, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to say a statement.
Okay, thank you. But I wanted to make sure that the body was okay with there being that being okay. Is there any objection to those two making a statement, considering that it is the only contested position? Then we will move forward, and Councilmember Lee, your name is alphabetical. The first and last name, you come first, and you've made the statement that you'd like to speak. You have the floor.
Yes. My esteemed council members and committee colleagues, I do very much want the position of vice chair. I had put this out some time back, but I did not, I guess in time, reach out and ask personally for everybody's endorsement. I did not think, let's see how I should put this. I didn't know we could run for the same seat over and over again. I did not know that. And I did not know, and I didn't want any of you all to think this, I didn't know at the time that I put out to you that I was interested in running. I did not know that my other council person had already wanted to run. As she explained to me, she had reached out to you all, but hadn't had a chance to reach out to me. So I didn't actually even know at that time she was running. But the Minority Caucus is very important to me. I hope that you got a little bit of that when I tried to organize the retreat that we did, so that we get a chance to know each other better and kind of bond together and know how we worked together. COVID hit and things kind of went sideways a little bit, but I thought that we needed a follow-up to that so that we could continue to bond and learn how to work together. So I hope that would be something that would continue, and we would do that. I will help my chair out and my fellow council people out in any way that I can. I will continue to support all of my Minority Caucus members. And work to help wherever I can fit in. I hope you know that I will do that. So just to let you know, I don't want it to go by without being said. This is very important to me, and I do want this position. But I appreciate everybody, and I appreciate you listening to me. And if I can help in any way as the next year goes forward, please don't hesitate, Madam Chair, or anyone else to ask, because I will step up and do what I can do. And I will say now, because I don't know if I'll have a chance to say it again, God bless you all. Stay safe. Merry Christmas, because I'm leaving, going home for Christmas, but I'm getting that in just in case near the end I don't have a chance to say it. But thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me this chance to share that information.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you so very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councilmember Lee, for also coming forward and wanting to serve. I definitely appreciate, I think we all appreciate anytime someone wants to come forward and lead and serve. We all are extremely busy in our roles. So anytime anyone wants to serve, that's just a beautiful thing. So I just want to thank Councilmember Lee for coming forth in that manner. I also would like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity for serving as vice chair this past year, and I would like to solicit your vote and ask that you re-elect me to the position of vice chair. There are some things that I would like to get accomplished this year as vice chair, one of which I touched on a little bit earlier. I think that the Minority Caucus has a lot of potential. We see that when we've come together on issues, we've been able to move the needle. I mean, just look at this week with the letter that went out with Dr. Caldwell. Just about all the Minority Caucus members, if not all of the Minority Caucus members, signed on to that letter. And I think that we do have strength when we are working together, and I would love to see us just work together on more issues in the upcoming year, one of which is making sure that we have qualified minorities in the pipeline to serve our city. So again, Madam Chair, that's something that I would like to work on this upcoming year. So I appreciate the support that you all have lent to me this year. And again, I just ask you for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Win or lose, I think that you've already won the spot to work on that coordinating of bringing more qualified individuals into the pipeline. I think that's a great thing, and you can lead that. So even if I have to take some executive privilege and make sure, that's your job. So thank you very much. We've gotten our statements. Are there any other questions, any other discussions in regards to the two candidates? If not, we will move forward with our vote. And you can just say the name of the person as your vote, and we will calculate it as such. Councilmember Porterfield.
Councilmember Porterfield.
Councilmember Lee.
Antoinette Lee.
Councilmember Taylor.
Porterfield.
Councilmember Vercher. Councilmember Gamble.
Porterfield.
Councilmember Stiles.
Councilmember Porterfield.
Councilmember Toombs.
Councilmember Porterfield.
Councilmember Sepulveda.
Porterfield.
Councilmember Swarer.
Porterfield.
And Councilmember Hurt votes Councilmember Lee. So I think that makes it 8 for 7. Yeah.
I was voting for Councilwoman Lee also.
Okay, Councilmember Vercher. So there are 3 votes for Councilmember Vercher and 7 for Councilmember Porterfield. Congratulations, Councilmember Porterfield. You are Vice Chair once again.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so very much. Thank you all for stepping up and being willing to serve in the role. I know we all have quite a few things that we are committed to do in our council jobs as well as our individual professions. So for us to continue to work as a group to make a difference and a change in this city, I think is awesome. This is the highest body for the African American community, and I think that we have served them well. So I thank you again for your support. I see 2 hands in the queue. Councilmember Vercher. Councilmember Vercher?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I want to say this because it has to be said. What transpired, and I was asking other caucus members, what transpired today hasn't ever transpired. Within the caucus, we've always afforded one another to lead. This is where we cultivate leadership within our caucus. So I just want to make sure that that's actually stated. I know a lot of times it is stated that that certain things aren't known, but I do want us to be mindful of that this caucus is where we cultivate our own leadership within our caucus, so that we are even more just well positioned in the entire body itself. And the entire body that I'm referring to is the Metro Council. So leadership within the caucus isn't about just being in a position. It's about, one, making sure that we're always elevating the caucus. And I hope that we continue to actually do that. But I wanted to state that we've always afforded those that wanted to serve within the caucus an opportunity to serve within the caucus. So I wanted to say that.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I want to congratulate and to thank everyone that stepped up. And I think it's also good that we had an election where we have two people that want a position. I think it shows that there's a lot of interest, and I think that's we should applaud that. It's also interesting that we didn't have anyone for secretary, and Councilmember Conte Toombs step up. I think that, speaking to what Councilmember Vacher is talking about, we just saw democracy within that little time that we have together, people stepping up and choosing and all of that. And I think it's all in the spirit of doing what is best for the caucus. And so as people continue to step up and serve and lead, I think it will be good for all of us. So I want to echo what she says and to basically applaud everyone that have their names in the hat, whether nominated or volunteered, whichever one it is. That it was good. So thank everyone. I just want to say that, and it was a good training and a good exercise and fun in some ways, but also learning and all of that. And thank you, Madam Chair, for your leadership and navigating us through that. I enjoyed it. I don't know, maybe enjoy should be the word for it, but I think the process, the way it moves out, I thought, it was good that people step up. So.
Thank you for your comments as well, Councilmember Swan. Councilmember Lee?
I'm asking for a point of personal privilege.
Yes,
I'm changing the subject a little bit because I think we are getting ready to be near the end of our agenda. Is that correct?
We are, but if you would, just let me go while we have the elections before you change. While this is not an elected position, but, we have a finance committee, a budget and finance committee within the caucus. And I did want to appoint Councilmember Zofat Swara as the chair of that committee for the council. And I wanted to know and ask if anyone was willing to serve on that committee with her.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is Councilmember Stiles. I'll serve with Councilmember Zwar.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilman Porterfield, I see your hand still up too. Did you want to speak?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. If the body does not feel like it's any type of conflict because Councilwoman Toombs and I are chair and vice chair of Budget and Finance. If it's not a conflict, then I would like to serve on our Budget Committee again this year.
Chair, they shouldn't.
Right, I was about to say, I think that there's that probably would be, even though I trust that you would remain objective, I just don't want the optics of it to speak to possible conflict. We always would appreciate your support, pretty much like Councilmember Toombs provided for our last committee. So I really appreciate that willingness on your part.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee, you now have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that one of our former council people, and he was actually in my district, Robert Duvall, passed. And I just want to, on behalf of the caucus and behalf of our area out here in the Southeast, offer our prayers and condolences to his family and say that we know that these are tough times and hope that they will gather the strength that they need and the support that they need from their friends and families, and that I hope that they find peace and strength during this time. And we were so sorry to hear that former council person Robert Duvall had passed.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for bringing it forth at this meeting. I certainly appreciate it. Councilmember Stiles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we adjourn, I wanted to take a moment. I know we have our reception that we usually do in February.
Yes, yes.
And if we might take a moment to talk about, given that we're in COVID and how that'll probably look differently, but just to talk about what we might want to convey as a theme and think about speakers, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm so glad you said that because, God always has a ram in the bush for us. I'm sure you saw that Tennessee State University just appointed Reverend Al Sharpton as an adjunct professor for this coming spring. And when I saw that, I reached out to Dr. Glover because the last time I spoke with her, she wanted to know what is it that she could do for me. So I thought that he would be a wonderful speaker for the reception. And so I reached out to her, and she said she would speak to him and see if he would be available. But we can recommend other speakers, and whatever you all would like, we can discuss now. So I will open the floor for any other suggestions. Go ahead, Councilmember Stiles.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for reaching out in regards to Reverend Sharpton. I think it would be great if we could put some names together so that for our next meeting, we could be prepared or vote on who we want.
Well, so if we're talking about getting someone of stature, we would typically need more than a couple of months to do so. And if we wait for another month, then we're talking about a month. That would be, because the caucus reception is held in February, and it would take us, that means we would only have 1 month. So I think we need to come up with the names that we would like at this point, and then we just have to aggressively go after whomever it is that we choose that we'd like to have as the speaker.
So in giving us a time frame, could we potentially, as we're talking about this, and today is the 14th, that over the next couple of weeks, we could come up with some names to put it together?
Do you have someone in mind?
Well, I wanted us to talk about what we wanted the theme for the program to be so we could think of who would be the best speaker for that event.
Well, typically, the Minority Caucus reception is an opportunity for the Minority Caucus to typically lay out what our agenda is. And when we lay out what that agenda looks like, then we bring in people that can help support it, what it is that we're looking for. Like a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, we were talking about the equal business opportunity legislation, and we brought in Wayne Messam, who was the president of National Black Caucus of Locally Elected Officials, and we had just received the Charlotte legislation that they passed for EBO, and we got ours passed. That next year we brought in Rodney Strong, who was the owner of our disparity studies. His company was hired to do the disparity studies and laid out all of the legislation that we needed for that. So he gave us the direction of where we were supposed to go as it related to EBO. And then last year, we brought in Chuckway, as you know, from Jackson, Mississippi, in terms of having a new mayor, laying out the landscape and how we build a relationship and the way we do things with mayor. So now we move forward with those things that we talked about that we want to do, or we come up with our new agenda, which we can, do them simultaneously.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to say before I go into the reception that it might be good, I don't know if we've done this in the past, but maybe to the families of the former council member, if there's a letter or something or card from the caucus on our behalf to the family. I don't know if we've ever done that, but I think that would be a good thing to send them something from the caucus as a thought. On the reception, considering that if we're still going to do it in February, unless we're thinking of moving it backward, but if we're still going to do it in February, time is of the essence. The other thing also is that when you're considering speakers, the calibers of the speaker that you get, some of them do cost money. I'm thinking from my stingy act that if you have Reverend Al Sharpton who is in town, the cost of getting him might not be that much, and considering the time frame, I'm speaking in support. I also speak in support considering the movement and the impact of the African American community, the Black community in this last election, and the trajectory of this country, and the power of the Black community, especially Black women. I think a civil rights icon, somebody like that. If you get a powerful Black woman, you get a Stacey Abrams, that would be phenomenal. But considering time, considering funding, if he's here, doesn't cost us much, I would want us to at least consider that. And I think we can tie his speech to where we are and what's going on with the movement at this time. So my thoughts.
You are absolutely right, Councilmember Suara, because Stacey Abrams was one of the first persons that we actually had talked with Dr. Glover about. We actually told her last year that we wanted Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams in that order, and this was before Kamala was chosen as President-elect Biden's running mate. And as I said, when Reverend Sharpton came up, for the reasons that you just mentioned in terms of money, time, all of that is the reason why I moved forward and reached out to her. So thank you very much. I appreciate that, those comments. Councilmember Sepulveda and then Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of thoughts about the fundraiser. I absolutely believe it should be virtual. And in my day job, I do fundraising, and all of our events have been virtual this year. And we've had speakers who have not charged us any money. And our speakers for this year were Congressman Maxine Waters, Senator Booker, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. It has been my experience that speakers have not been charging because it has been virtual. So I don't know what the situation would be for Al Sharpton, but I know that there are several elected officials that wouldn't charge us any money for it.
So you were doing fundraising. Who are they speakers for?
The Tennessee Democratic Party.
Okay.
And so I highly would recommend sending multiple request out. That has been my experience as to has worked the fastest. We would send multiple requests out, and usually the first couple that bite, we choose which one is better, and then nicely turn everyone else down, say that we have already found a speaker. So I would suggest sending out multiple requests.
Oh, absolutely. That is perfect. I had no idea that you had that depth of contact. So I would definitely welcome you reaching out to the contacts that you have. And as you said, whoever comes first, because Reverend Sharpton has not agreed. In fact, we are due to submit a letter to Dr. Glover in order for her to reach out to him. So that would be perfectly fine. But just keep in mind that the reception does occur in February. And it definitely will be virtual. Councilmember Gamble. Okay, thank you, Councilmember Sepulveda. Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, Councilwoman Sepulveda touched on what I planned to comment about, and that was the fact that the fundraisers should definitely be planned as a virtual reception. I agree with that point, considering we are not anywhere near out of the woods with COVID yet, and not sure where we'll be at that point. And also agreeing that we should open up the floor for several potential guest speakers. I like the idea of Al Sharpton. I like the idea of Stacey Abrams and others that you all have mentioned. Wanted to find out if we probably need to nail down the date and theme before we reach out to the potential speakers, so that we know what date we're asking them to commit to. Do we have a date, I guess I should ask?
Well, we typically will accommodate them. We will let them know that the latter part of February, because that gives us more time. So whatever works best for them is what we do to try to accommodate our speakers. And I don't know if I said something to lead you all to believe that we were considering having an in-person, face-to-face reception, but no, we were not intending. That was not my intention. It's never been thought that it would be face-to-face. It just so happens that Dr. Glover announced the appointment of Reverend Sharpton. But just because she's here at Tennessee State doesn't mean that I meant that we were gonna be having something there, or we would go somewhere else. No, that was not it at all. It is definitely going to be a virtual event. And I can say that for my organization, we had a virtual event, and we had a celebrity guest speaker, and we had to pay her. So I truly welcome any possibility of receiving a speaker of the names that I've heard tonight to be free of charge. So thank you, Councilmember Gamble. Councilmember Porterfield?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make two really brief suggestions. I think that if we can get Reverend Sharpton, I think that he will be someone very valuable for us to get. I also like some of the other names that have been mentioned, Ayanna Presley, Stacey Abrams. I would also like to add to that list AOC, someone that I truly admire, would love to get her name on there. The other thing that I wanted to lift up would be to see if there's any appetite from the caucus to have more than one speaker, since we are virtual this time around. We know that it won't be exactly the same way that it's been in the past. We won't have the food unless we're doing boxes. I think I don't know who all attended. I know Councilmember Toombs did, but the Links chapter here in Nashville had an event, I believe it was this past weekend, and they actually had boxes where you could, pick up the wine and the snacks, and that was really, really nice. So I think that's an idea of something that could be done if we are wanting people to have something there. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's a great thing to add if we have it. But this is also an opportunity for us to make money in a fundraiser without spending out money, since we're having it virtually. We don't have to pay for catering and things of that nature. But to my point, since it is virtual, we may not have some of those things that we have traditionally had, like we had a musical guest last year. So we will have more time. So if the caucus would like, maybe we could consider having more than one guest to speak to us.
Well, Councilmember Stiles had talked about having a committee together, and Councilmember Porterfield as vice chair, for you to work on the reception is a wonderful thing, and it sounds like you've got some great ideas. That would be great if you wanted to take that on and work with your Southeast colleagues, because it sounds like you all are thinking on the same way. And you all have some ideas of what can be done. Please feel free to take that and create the reception. And next meeting, you can provide us with some updates of what's happening and what's going on.
I would love that opportunity, Madam Chair, and I just want to acknowledge that junior council member Janiyah Williams, who's my daughter, my 13-year-old, who's listening to the meeting, just acknowledged that I've gotten volunteer for two things, but I would love to do that, Madam Chair. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, quite welcome. Yes, Councilmember Stiles.
That was Councilwoman Vercher.
Oh, I just see Councilmember Stiles' hand up. I'm sorry. Councilmember Stiles, did you have something you wanted to say?
I did, Madam Chair. I can go after Councilmember Vercher.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Vercher.
I just want to, just a soft reminder of the purpose of the caucus reception, and be mindful of who our audience is. Our caucus reception isn't like, just for lack of better words, a Links event or a sorority event. The intent of the reception is totally different. So that's why we've gone through the efforts of utilizing excuse me, the speakers that we have, your speakers are your attraction, and the politicos are accustomed to a type caliber speaker at the Minority Caucus reception. So I just want to I just want to add that. Just add my 2 cents for what it's worth, Madam Chair. Take it or leave it.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Styles.
So, Madam Chair, I was wondering if we don't discuss a theme tonight, could we try and ponder this and send some thoughts to you?
Well, I don't know if it needs to be thematic.
Your theme is based upon who your speaker is. You don't choose a national speaker and you tell them what they should say. You let, depending on who we go with, they set the theme. They set the theme and they set the date. We accommodate them.
I would disagree, as I've planned events as well. I think if you decide, the collective decides that we want a theme, then we can find someone that fits that theme. I think it's possible to do both, understanding that in the past it may not have been done that way. But I think we do also need to be open to possibilities as well.
Okay, well,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Let's have a dialogue on a theme tonight then.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I think before we go into the theme, and I think that, and I've seen it both ways too, about to give speakers theme to speak on. We can do it either way, whichever one is easy. If we have somebody that we really like, we'll let them pick what they want to speak to. So both works. But I think a question that I do want to direct this, and I hope I'm not out of order, but I do want to direct the question to Councilmember Virtue. What is the purpose of the reception? Because, okay, thank you. Because I wanted to make sure that if we don't know it, and you see what I'm saying? I want it to be like an answer to this is what it is, so that we can know and we can move towards it.
Well, let me just say, well, you want to go ahead and respond, Councilman Virtue? I don't want to take that away since she specifically asked you.
So, if everybody can just close your eyes and think about who was in the room the last couple of caucus receptions. And I don't know how many each of you have ever attended, but during this caucus, prior caucuses, if you can think about who was in the room at those receptions. So let that thought come into your mind. You see who's in the room. Who's in the room isn't our aunties and uncles. Who's in the room is the power brokers in the city, both in the city and outside the city, because we've had other delegates come in from Memphis, Knoxville, Chattanooga, et cetera. It's not your typical social gathering. It's an event where many are looking at what the next agenda, the caucus exerting their power, their platform for the upcoming year. It's a way for them to communicate to us, for us to communicate to them. And then the last part is, of course, about raising money. Let me give you an example of the work of the caucus. Earlier, I don't know if it was, I think, yeah, it had to have been last year, because we've never discussed changing banks, or there was any questions of why the caucus did banking with Citizens. So what that effort did is allowed for, and Citizens is a black bank. What that allowed for was another city to follow our model in providing business citizen. And what that is, the Atlanta Hawks announced a historic agreement with black-owned banks. It was a $35 million refinancing of Emory Sports. That's the kind of platform and efforts and influence that this caucus have developed over the last couple of years, where not just your politicals here is looking at what we push, the agenda that we push, but other local elected officials are looking at the agendas that we push. As a result of us standing strong and saying we're going to support our black bank here in the city, that created the dialogue for other Metro department heads to want to use Citizens Bank as well. And I believe Lonnie Matthews, with his area, wanted all their transactions to go through.
And so did Marsha Crawford with the Housing Fund. But Citizens Bank is not only, I got my Jefferson Street hat on now, but Citizens Bank is not the oldest black bank here. It's the oldest bank in the United States of America. It was created in 1904. So, and it's still standing. So it does have some historical significance. And I know that a lot of discussions that seem contentious comes from the old and the new. But I try to be very respectful, and I don't think that others are not being respectful, but I do respect the history and what it is and what it brings, and especially those that have been around. And one person that never ever says anything, but I know that when nobody else was doing anything, Rosie was there. And I don't want anything to step on her toes and for her to not be engaged in what's happening and how it has been over the years. When I started going to the Minority Caucus reception many, many years ago, they used to bring department heads for people to talk to them about what's going on, to have it for the citizens. And it really did not prove or benefit anything. So then the Minority Caucus, when they stood up.
Yeah, it didn't have. I said it didn't have the turnout.
No, it did not have the turnout, and it didn't prove to be successful on either part. But when the Minority Caucus made its turn was when they stood strong with together and told Phil Bredesen if they didn't bring in a certain number of contractors, that they were not going to support the stadium. And that's when things started to change. That's when they realized that there was influence from the Minority Caucus, and Don Majors will happily tell you about it because he was one of the leaders of that action. And that's when they changed the thing. That's when they came in, and Belmont then came up and wanted to start opening up to the communities and doing a little bit more, and it went to Belmont. So those kinds of things just transpired, and this is not necessarily a fundraiser. We may raise funds with the event itself, but it's not a fundraiser. It's an opportunity for the Minority Caucus to lay out its agenda for the next year.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. I think those knowledge that needs to be passed around and shared. And I think that knowing that affects what we do. I say that because one of the reasons that I heard is that it's an opportunity for us to share our plan and to also get input. I did not see us getting input at that reception. Again, I'm not saying that, Madam Chair, please understand what I'm trying to say. I want us to take this information as the committee is planning the next reception to be able to know what is our focus, what do we want to get out of it, why was this plan in the past, what is the purpose it's supposed to serve, so that we can make sure that all that is met. That's the reason why I'm asking, and I think it helps a lot, because if it's not just about raising money, then you want to make sure that
because it's not about raising money at all.
So
it's not about raising money at all.
That's very good. And so I will also tell the committee working on this to also dig some more and have some more information. One of the questions that I've always asked, and this came up when we were doing the John Lewis Way committee, and we were talking about we're going to be raising money, and I'll give a report at the next meeting. We're going to be raising money. What agency will be taking that money for us? And I suggested the Minority Caucus. But then the question became, what is the structure of the Minority Caucus? Are we a C3? Are we an association? Are we a PAC? I don't know the answer to that question. I probably should, but I don't. And so that's where my line of questioning is coming in, that we need to know what is the point, what is the purpose, what are we doing with that reception, so that as we plan the speaker, the activity, it's all tied in. It's not, if we're supposed to get feedback, then we need to find a way to do feedback and give information. If we're supposed to get information, if we're supposed to have the powerhouses in the room, we need to make sure that we're looking at who is in the room. We're also checking who is not in the room. Does that make sense? I'm not making it complicated, and it may not be something we will achieve with the February, but that's the way that I will approach anything that I'm doing, so that the objective of the event or the purpose of what we're doing is met. And I'm just putting this as a suggestion to the body, more specifically to the committee that is planning it.
Right. Well, as far as I know, it was not about getting input, so to speak, but it was basically just to lay out the agenda of the caucus, and the reception is a way for us to build and to taunt the unity and the influence that we have as a caucus. And to be able to see that, and having the speakers that we did, and then more people were coming. More people saw that the caucus was a more meaningful unit and entity. No, we're not a 501c3. We do have a minority PAC, so to speak. But all of this, I found out once I became chair, not before. So you look at what happens, and we have to have it. We have it in February, yes, because it's Black History Month. But we also do it prior to, because after that, it's our budget, all budget, and then when people are elected, we're elected in September. So you only have that little time before you get to February. You get elected into the council, then you got to get elected in the caucus and get together, decide what your agenda is going to be, what you're going to do, and how you do it. So you really don't have but about 3 months to do anything anyway. And, and again, I can tell you that prior to when Councilmember Vercher and I were not, when we were freshmen and just got on the council, it was really not much structure. And Rosie can tell you. And so, we met sometimes and sometimes we didn't. So when I tell you that us meeting every month has been 100 and
20 degrees.
80 degree turn, 180 degree turn around from where we were, it has been. And to move quickly, and I understand, you all felt like you didn't have anything to do and didn't know, you really wouldn't know what to do because you just got in. because we just got into the positions to know what to do and how to do ourselves. So that's the reason why, and we knew we had to move quickly, and we did it. And I don't have any problem answering any questions, and I actually tried to share as much as I possibly can to explain why it is that I do what I do and why things are going on as it is. And I just think that we have to come to that understanding.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And
Yeah.
Councilman Porterfield has her hand. I know we're kind of late going on into the meeting. We're going to hear this comment and try to close out. Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and I definitely appreciate you and Councilmember Vercher for giving us the history of the event and sharing that, just that institutional knowledge with us. I think is very helpful as newer members. It definitely is helpful to get the history. That's just context that we don't always have. I think that I would propose, if it is the will of the caucus, I would propose that since this is not legislation, we can continue to discuss this outside of the meeting. So my proposal would be anyone who has any suggestions for what they would like to see or would not like to see, if we could share that through email, and I can create a document for us to add your ideas to a Google Doc. And if people can do that between now and Christmas, and then Councilmember Stiles and myself and anyone else who wants to help work on this, we can help work on a drafted proposal to bring to the caucus by the first meeting in January, which is, by the first week of January. We could even do that before our January meeting. We can bring that proposal to the caucus, and that way, if there's something else that we need to work on or iron out, we can have all of those details ready to go so that we're not pushing up so close to the date of the event. I do think we all have wonderful ideas, and we want to make sure that we incorporate everybody's ideas. We want to incorporate what has been previously done, and we also want to incorporate new ideas as well. And I think that would give everybody an opportunity to have their voice heard. So, Madam Chair, if you're not in opposition, and if the caucus is not in opposition, that's what I propose.
And I would absolutely welcome it, because I can't do it all. I got 3 jobs, so I need some help. But just to let you all know that, as I said, with Councilmember Vercher and I, it was not much going on, not much happening, and people were assigned, they were in positions, and they were going to do certain things that they were assigned things to do, and they didn't do it. And being the doer that I am, I just get it done. Being the doer that she is, she gets it done. So we got it done and pulled it off. So it is not just because we do. I would love and welcome any initiative and effort. That's why I was so happy that Councilmember Lee stepped up and said she was willing to work on the retreat. I would love and definitely accept and engage any assistance in order for us to carry out what it is that we are trying to do as a caucus. So I thank you all very, very much.
Madam Chair, January is too late. But before I think before we adjourn this meeting, we need to have a decision. January is too late.
And I know you were talking about the theme.
For me, it doesn't matter. I'm not needy for my ideas to be incorporated. I mean, you already know how I feel about the caucus. It's about the caucus. It's not about me. But if we're going to go with the theme, and when that letter is pitched to Reverend Al Sharpton, we need to include the theme. but also if we decide to give him the option to not speak within the theme. So either way, we need to decide tonight, because the letter needs to be going out before the Christmas holiday. And I just know historically, I know it looks like the reception looks like it's last minute planning, but it is not. The thoughts for the next reception, the conversations are had the evening of the night of the current reception. So it's not that is planned last minute. But I think we need to make a decision tonight.
And also,
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, it's Councilwoman Gamble speaking. I apologize for interrupting, but I think a suggestion was made that the discussion continue offline. It's after 9:30, and to suggest that we should continue tonight, I don't think that's a prudent thing to do at this point. Maybe we should continue the conversation through email after this meeting. I would. If I need to make a motion for that, I'll do that.
Okay.
Madam Chair, what I was suggesting is you got suggestions from Sepulveda, suggestions from Councilwoman Stiles, suggestions from Councilwoman Porterfield. We can move forward with that tonight. We don't need to keep having discussions to make an offer to someone to come speak at the caucus reception.
But we do still need to discuss them, and there lies the timing issue as far as continuing on tonight.
What's the discussion of asking who they suggested would be good speakers?
There will be a list. I mean, you're suggesting that we make a decision tonight on that?
No, we're already in agreement with Reverend Al Sharpton. We're already in agreement with asking multiple people. What? Maybe I'm missing it. What further discussion do we need?
Why are you asking that we continue? I mean, maybe I'm missing it. You just suggested that we continue.
So listen. We're going to bring some order back to the meeting. The issue, we need to not focus on the speaker, because the speaker is not. It is the icing on the cake, but it's not the cake. The cake is the caucus and our agenda and what it is that we do. We talk about accomplishments that we have done and bring people up to update. We update our people who support us. And we also think about the relationships that we build, having Dr. Glover provide someone. That's a piece in there that means a lot too, building that relationship with a local leader here. So all of those things are critical and important for us to do that. So the thing that we did say is that we thought that Reverend Al Sharpton was a good candidate. We also said that that there may be one or two other people that we could come up with. So I think that what we need to do, and Councilmember Porterfield can lead this, because I already asked her to prepare a letter. And I think that if she prepares that letter, the letter can go to not a commitment of anything, but to not to councilman, but could go to Reverend Sharpton and one or two other people that we think would be good. And we can lock down someone over this holiday time. And when we come back in January, we'll have a plan outlined for what it is that we're going to do. And we can look at our dates, as I said, in February, and probably the last Monday or Tuesday in February, which gives us, 2 months for us to plan. So with that, and I too I have my allergies and my voice is really, I'm losing my voice at this time. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And with that, I think it's clear what it is that we will be doing at this point. Because we've been on this call, some of us, since 4 o'clock today. So thank you all very much. I appreciate the robust conversation and the discussions. And I hope everyone has a good night, and I'll see you all tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Good night.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.